I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I haven't like talked about it yet, but design patterns for analysis is an area that's very interesting to me because I feel like we do the same things, right? Like I'll do an aggregation on a population and then I'll like pull in some top level numbers. And so it kind of like accordions out at different points based on like what information you're joining at what level of aggregation.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
I want you to say more, because when someone says design, I immediately just go to like typography and branding and graphic design, which I think is related. But I think you're talking more like systems design.
Sort of like, so design patterns will be like the way that you build software or something. Like when you start to really get into it, there are patterns that people follow.
Okay.
In the way that they build things, like almost like the way that certain buildings are similar. And you can kind of see like, oh, that's a skyscraper and it must have these internal components that hold it up and keep it together. And so it's kind of like architecture.
Yeah. So like that, you're so sweet for being like, kind of. No, I was like over here and you're like, no. So almost like a blueprint for building something, right? Like,
yeah, but like typography is a system, right? Like in
yeah.
typography, you have like your uppercase and your lowercase and your punctuation, and it all looks the same way. In the same way that like, if you've ever seen like a design library, you're reusing the same components. Yeah. So that idea is like you're onto something with that idea.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I am very curious about the basically like components of an analysis, like in the sense that like ggplot has this language where you layer in all of these things. I think there might be something there with like analysis, and just people do the same analyses over and over again. Like you always see people doing the same dplyr commands.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, that could be abstracted somehow.
Yes. Anyway. Yes. Okay. So it's like, yes, I could see that. So I think we tend to currently think of it as like this cycle, right? Like you collect your data, you wrangle your data, and then you go through like the explore and model cycle and that iteration, and then you come out in communication. But you're talking more about like that granular level of when I'm doing EDA or when I'm doing wrangling. It's almost like looking at the outcome. I'm trying to do X. And then these are the functions or the code that kind of pulls into that.
Yeah. Like I think to build a data set functionally, you're doing the same things over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just thinking about how sometimes to build different kinds of data set, like if you want to build a data set that has like time slices, you're doing the same series of commands over and over again, but just like slightly differently. Yeah. And then like feature engineering is kind of similar, right? Like you're taking these same pieces and you're just doing like the same transformations of them.
Yeah, where I could see like, yes, enthusiastically 100% on board. I think you're right. There's something there. I almost see it as like this course, right? You've got these design systems, and then where it becomes individualized is almost when you're in a level of domain expertise or specialty. I'm thinking about education, right? When I was doing education data, there was a consistent like, okay, I have a new data set. I know that I have to do these 3 things every single time, no matter what. But we don't articulate that, right? We usually are like, oh, I just know. It's like that, making that stuff that you know you have to do kind of explicit for other people.
I've been thinking about like a question I haven't posted on Twitter yet, but just like, what's the white whale of your career?
Oh, so like the elusive thing that you keep chasing?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a white whale of your career?
I'm honing in on it, and it's around EDA.
Okay.
Because I think that EDA is like the best thing that you can do to improve modeling. And I like, that's the hill I'll die on. I'm very willing to die on that hill. So yeah, it's thinking about like, what parts of EDA could we automate? How could we expand it? How could we get better at it? Like, I'm super fascinated by that area.
Yeah, well, that was a conversation I was talking to Randy Au, and we were talking about census data. And he had made a comment about really just, oh gosh, now I'm going to mess it all up, but like really just taking a week to understand a couple of columns of data.
Yeah.
And
Census data.
something like that. I'll figure out the correct quote, but like, there is a sense like when I was learning data science, and I just like EDA was like, get it done, like get through it, figure some stuff out and get it done. And as I progressed in my career, it really is this fun place. Like it is unconstrained idea generation.
Yeah. And non-linear often.
I was just gonna say, you could fig jam EDA, like there's something in there about like fig jam and EDA and being able to, you know, really pull on that and like explore. I'm just thinking about how fun it would be to have a data set that you never take to modeling and you just like the only thing you do is EDA, right? And like that's the goal, is like what can you come up with and what can you learn?
Yeah. I think my consulting time taught me that so much of the value of the modeling process is in communicating the relationships in the data to people who don't know them yet. And so like, yes, the model is super valuable. Great. We have predictions, we can make business decisions, but also the thinking around the model and just the thinking around your data is like almost more valuable for helping people to think about the way like their customers interact or whatever it is that they're trying to measure.
Yeah, who was I talking to? We were talking about like the hard problems in data science. And I maintain that the hardest problem in data science is people, right? And for like 1,000 reasons. But I think about my time as a data scientist, and it was never, I thought it was hard. Like, oh, I would do technically challenging things and I would be so proud of myself. And like, I did it. But like, people come to me and be like, I don't know how to read this graph. And I'm like, oh, you know, like that's where it falls down. Like I would make very early in my career, I remember pulling together this like 100-page report for the Girl Scouts. And I was like, it's so obvious that what we need to do is invest in ABC. And people were like, I'm not reading any of this.
Yeah. It's like a 1 deck, 10 slides. Please.
Yeah, but like explaining that relationship is so important, because I think that is a place where as data scientists, it takes me a lot of work to realize like, oh, just because I'm immersed in this world doesn't mean everybody else is immersed in this world and knows what I'm talking about. Even like it is worth explaining, like when you show a bar chart, you know, your statement like, oh, you know, blank is Y because of this bar being bigger, right? And that's how we see it. So
yeah, I think some of the hardest things in data science communication are like exactly what you're saying with people. You want to meet them where you are, but that also means you have to figure out where they are. And that can be really difficult because everyone has different contexts. And so I think like when you're writing, transitioning is the hardest part of writing, like making sure that you're getting clearly from one idea to the next. And that also happens in data science, right? Because you have all these insights or this output that you want to tie together and present to people. And so you have to like bring them with you at each stage. And that's the part, like when I'm reading my own communication around data, it's like, I'm constantly going back and looking at the transitions and like, am I telling you why I'm looking at this next thing after I just presented this first thing and before I present the thing after? And I think it's really hard, like even having done it forever. It's yeah.
But you have some cool projects. So you have so many cool projects. So I was going through your website and revisiting some of my favorite blog posts from you. And the one that I think of the most, and that I've actually shared with quite a few people, is your N=1 on motherhood in tech. And you, first of all, I saw your data, you have this beautiful data visualization where you look at your time before your baby, your first baby, and then you look at how your time was allocated for the months after. And that was the moment where I was like, I don't think I could be a parent. Like that is data-driven decision-making. Like that is not the life for me. But like so you're a mom of 2 now, and you have 2 dogs. Like how has that graph changed?
A lot. So I think there are too many axes to plot it in a clean way now. because the time is also like time I'm spending with my son. So I have a baby who is 8 months, and then my daughter's 3. And so, yeah, things have changed, even going from n=1 to n=2. Yeah, I'm not sure that I could plot it anymore without including like my husband and the way that he's spending his time and the way that we have childcare, and the childcare is covering time in the middle. And so, yeah, it's a lot, but it was really cool to make that visualization, because I think there was so much, the whole emphasis of that post is there was so much I didn't know before having a kid. And I asked a lot of questions, but there was still stuff that I just like wish I could have internalized a bit better. And the time, like, what do you do when you're on maternity leave? Like, I really didn't know what those days looked like. I hadn't had anyone super close to me have a baby, like, since I was an adult. So, yeah, I wanted to communicate that. And I had a friend at work, and I was having this conversation with him about how, like, there's a whole like math around feeding babies that is just like it takes so much mental space. Like the cognitive load of keeping track of all of that stuff is just a whole thing that I also didn't know was coming. But I was describing to him how like dropping a feed and the calculus involved there meant that I had like an extra, I think, an hour or two of free time. And he was just like, what? And I'm trying to explain this in conversation. I was like, let me like show you. And so that is the reason for that particular bar chart, which shows my time before baby and their colors for like free time, going to work, taking care, or not taking care of kids because I didn't have a baby yet, but you know, all the things I was doing, and then like what that looked like at different months afterwards.
Yeah. So I want to take a little bit of a detour, because in going through your blog, I found your delegation post. That whole post is brilliant, but you have this thing about narrowing down your list, and I have it written down here in terms of delegation. So when you delegate, you have these 5 questions. Does the work really need to be done? Which I was like, whoo, that's a whole thing to unpack. Could this work be automated? Which, of course. Have I learned all that I can from my time owning this work? Is there someone else who would benefit from the experience of owning this work? And do I want to be the subject matter expert in this area? And like, that is just life advice, I feel like, in so many ways. But I really want to talk about, have I learned all that I can from my time owning this work? How, like, what suggestions, or like, how do you evaluate that?
Yeah, I think those last few questions really go hand in hand. So a really specific example of something that I delegated around the time I wrote that post was we had an internal office hour. So once a week, we would set up a Zoom call, and for the first 20 to 30 minutes, it would be a presentation from someone on the data team. And then sort of an open space for Q&A if people are learning SQL or having questions about our data models or wanting a quick data pull or someone to check their work. All of those things were kind of fair game. And so I set that up, got the program running, would coordinate the week to week, who's talking, what topics are they doing. And this is something I'd done before as an organizer of our ladies and all the ladies in tech. So I had a lot of experience putting together groups of talks and curating a schedule. And so it was something where I kind of felt like I reached the end of my learning journey with it. Like, I'm not getting a lot out of organizing this. I'm certainly not getting as much out of organizing this than as someone would be who hadn't had that experience yet, right? Yeah. And so I think thinking about what are the things that you want to go deep in? Are there areas where you want to be known as an expert? And if so, make sure that you're trying to angle your responsibilities in like towards that goal or towards that area that you're interested in learning more about. But if there are things that you're doing that are in areas that you aren't interested in or aren't serving you, or you feel like you've learned really well, I think it's a good idea to consider letting them go if you have that opportunity. Obviously, we all have to do things sometimes that we don't want to do or love to do. But sometimes I think there's more opportunity to delegate responsibility than you might see at first glance. Like if you really take a look at everything on your plate and say, do I need to do this? Am I the only one who has the personalized skills necessary to do this thing? And I couldn't train someone else to do it. I think most often the answer is no, even if there are things that we want to maybe tell ourselves that we're the only one who knows how to do this. It's like, you can train someone, you can work with other people. And so I think thinking more about that was really eye-opening and helpful for me.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, I think, one of the hard questions that I still struggle with is, do I want to be the subject matter expert in this area? And that is, I think, gets back to your white whale question. And is that something, like, do you think about that often? Like, how often do you reflect about these kinds of things?
I would say quite often. And something that's tricky for me is I'm a generalist. And so within data science, I have experience across the board. So I've done a lot of analysis, I've done A/B testing, I've done machine learning engineering, and I love it all. And so that is a problem in the sense of I haven't picked one thing that I want to like commit to forever. So I think thinking about like which parts of working in those different areas I maybe could automate, and maybe building the automation is something that I'm interested in. Maybe that's something I haven't done yet. But I would say I think a lot about it. And if there are things that I think like parts of those processes that I've done or that other people would like to own or would be better suited to own, then I'm happy to delegate those or work with other people to transition responsibility.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of self-reflection involved in that. And I think, you are such a great example of a successful generalist in data science. Did you intend to become a generalist, or were you like, how did that come about?
I think so. My first 4 years were spent at a predictive analytics company. And so we built predictive analytics software, and then we applied that software. And so my role was such a mix. It was a really small company. And so I wore a lot of hats, including writing blogs. Like it was that many hats. So
Oh my gosh.
one of the things that I did in that role was consulting. And so taking problems from end to end, like hearing stakeholders talk about what they wish they knew about, we worked a lot with colleges and universities. So what they wish they knew about their students or what they wish they could predict, and figuring out how do we formulate a data set to solve that problem? How do we build a model to solve that problem? And then how do we make sure that you can run the model and you understand the outputs and we're getting buy-in and all of the steps. So I think my first experience was really going end to end, and that is my happy place. So like taking a problem and working to kind of shepherd it through all of the data science steps and making sure that we're checking in and we're getting as much value as possible out of each step is something that's really important to me.
Yeah. And I think it's a harder skill to know that you want to do going into data science. And it's harder to train for, right? I think, especially now when we look at data science, right? You go through schools, you go through programs, and it tends to be more technique focused. But yeah, I think being a generalist is a lot of fun. I think it gives you a lot of exposure to so many different pieces.
I love it. So that was one of the things about consulting that I really loved is we got to play in everyone's backyard and really get to learn like, what data do you have? And oh, that's a really interesting thing. Like we could build some cool features out of that. Let's try it. As far as the education, so I started doing data science in 2011. Things looked very different then. And when I joined this first company, it was started by a guy who was consulting and he wanted to automate some of the parts of the consulting process. And so it's funny, he started with modeling and building something to automate building models. And then he was like, oh, we need to focus on the data cleaning and preparation because that's really the hard part that people are struggling with. And so I learned how to do that. And the entire 4 years that I worked there, I worked under him. And so he, like when I was ready to share my first model and my first like analysis with clients, I'm like, okay, I have the meeting scheduled, like I'm good to go. And he was like, can we review it? I'm like, yeah, of course. And he looked at it and just like, I found all of these things that I had missed. They were just subject matter stuff. But it was really great to learn from someone who had a ton of experience, and I was learning in a way that was very applied and very hands-on. I got to be very deep in the data, and I wouldn't trade those 4 years for anything. Especially now, I think something like code review is common on the analysis and modeling side, but also people don't have the time to understand your domain as well as you do. And so getting to work really closely in a couple of domains with someone who knew them really well just instilled a lot of really good like best practices that I've taken everywhere else I've gone.
Yeah. Oh, that's an incredible experience. Yeah. So I have no way to bring you along on this mind map journey. This is just out of the blue. I would like to talk about the Cubs.
Yes.
Because I do live in the Chicago suburbs. I'm not going to get Chicagoans mad by saying I live in Chicago. I live outside Chicago, but I had a call with Nick Wan and was like, how does someone get into sports? And he was like, you do baseball. Like baseball is a great sport. And then you're a Cubs fan.
I'm a lifelong Cubs fan.
Lifelong Cubs fan. Okay. So you live in Texas now.
Yeah.
Why the Cubs?
So until I was 10, lived in the southwest suburbs of Chicago. So I grew up in Oak Lawn and then also New Hampshire. But I grew up going to baseball games, and my dad actually would take us to both White Sox games and Cubs games. But tickets were really cheap for the Cubs. And so you could just buy tickets on like a random school day and go to a game, and that was easy enough to do. And so we did it. And when I was a kid, that was when the Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa era was happening. So we got to see at least one of those games. And it was just a really fun time to be a fan, even though like they weren't doing well. That's okay. It's going to happen forever. But yeah, 2016 was like pretty amazing. That month, November 2016, the Cubs won the World Series and I got married. I was just like, this is amazing.
Like two big things. Yeah, as a lifelong. So I grew up in Buffalo. So have yet to secure something like the Super Bowl or, the Stanley Cup in my lifetime. But I can imagine what that must be like if you have a team that gets close or like is just never close. And and a wedding all in the same month. That's incredible.
I cried. It was really amazing.
Yeah. So, I mean, like Buffalo fans are huge. Like we are diehard fans. Even if you don't follow football, like you're a Bills fan, it's just it's in the air you breathe, it's in the water. And I remember I was in Dallas, Texas, watching a Nick Offerman show, and he had the blue W hanging up behind him. And he had to explain to the audience that the Cubs were in the playoffs. And this was 2016, and that he was getting a live feed of game updates. And he would actually stop the show to like cheer for what was happening in the game. I was like,
it was such a fun time. And after so many years, like decades, lifetimes of people not seeing them do well. I impulse bought plane tickets to one of the away games because I was like, maybe we should. This was like, I don't know, 2 weeks before my wedding, and so we're like, we can't be doing this. But yeah, it was such an exciting, cool thing to see.
I love it. Yeah, when I was looking at apartments out here, Rogers Park was actually one of the places that I was looking to live, because I was like, I could just like pop down to a baseball game. That could be fun. So
that's where. So I went to Loyola, and so I lived in Rogers Park for 3 years. Yeah,
I love Chicago. Love the area. Yes. Huge fan. So to kind of close things out though, I could talk about the Cubs all day, even though I don't follow the Cubs yet, but where on the internets is a good place to find you?
Twitter, or as long as it's around. I started a Mastodon account too, but I am committed to Twitter. So I will be there for as long as the other people are there. And I hope that's forever. And then I have a blog at caitlinhudon.com. And I think those are the best places to find me.
Perfect.